Hey everyone, my name's Adam Archer, and today we're going to be taking a look at a very special piece. This is the Rob Dalton Dogface double-edged version, so you can see two edges. Rob Dalton is very famous for both his overpowered automatic knives, such as the Dalton STC, or Safe to Carry, as well as brass knuckles. So I have a pair of war clops that I've done a video on previously. You can see that dramatic middle finger spike, very aggressive on there, made out of T6 aluminum. So he's very famous for both those, but he is super famous for combining the two, making brass knuckle automatic knives. So you can see here the Double Trouble Interrogator model, which features a automatic claw on that knife. So that's just super aggressive. So how this video is going to go out, let's first deploy the blade. I know you guys are going to want to see that. I'll talk about some of the specs as well as the history behind this knife, and then we'll take a look at some of the details of the knife a little bit closer, and I'll talk about my opinion of it. So let's deploy that blade, or retract it then deploy. So to retract the blade, you're going to want to press the button. This is a plunge lock button, and then pull back on the leather thong to get the retraction bar to extend. Once it locks closed, you just want to push that retraction bar right back in. And to deploy the blade, simply press the button. And you could probably heard just how loud that deployment was. This knife is going out fast. It's a single action out the front, so that means unlike a double action where you push the lever forward and it shoots out, and then when you pull the lever back, it retracts, which normally features 2 to 4 springs. So there would be a set of springs here, a set of springs here. They would either pull it or push it forward. This features one large spring inside that you actually retract, which makes it shoot out much, much harder. Of course, that does mean that retracting the knife does take 2 hands. So, as I mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the specs of this knife, or about the different features. So this knife was made in December of 2008. Rob Dalton would make about one model per month or something like that, and then he would go on to the next model. There were only 80 of the double-edged right-handed versions made, 11 left-handed versions, and you may be thinking, is this the left-handed version, as it seems like it is somewhat reversed. Normally when you look at the display side of a knife, or an automatic knife, the blade will actually be facing to the right, like with the letters and all that. With this, it's actually reversed. So you can see here, the Benchmade Auto Striker logo is facing you where it's readable, then the blade's facing to the left. With this, it was done intentionally so that the right-handed version would be facing to the right, and the reason for that, when you have the dog face in your hand, your thumb will actually naturally rest around where the deployment button is. So you're not really searching for that button when you wish to deploy the blade. Your hand is just kind of naturally resting in that position. If it was on the reverse side, that is a little bit more difficult of a grip. However, if you do prefer it on this other side, they did make 11 of them. Good luck trying to find one, though. It took me about 7 years to track this one down. They are incredibly difficult to find. So as I already mentioned, it was made in December of 2008, so a good time ago. Where you could purchase them, you could get them directly from Rob Dalton, or from stores like Blade HQ, which was an authorized dealer. The price on these originally was about $297. The price now that you'll be expecting to pay on the secondary market, I had actually only seen these available for sale once or twice, and the last time, before I purchased this, I had seen it for sale for, I think it was $1,600. That was from a Russian seller, which was way out of my price range. So I didn't pay anywhere close to that, but they are not cheap knives because of the very limited availability and the desirability of this knife. It also comes in a single edge version. The single edge version does look a little bit different. Of course, it would be single edge. It also does not have this cutout in the blade, but rather a notch at the top here, and the button is moved up here. The engraving is different on the single edge version as well. It just simply says Dogface in much bigger letters. So handle material is T6 aluminum with a black anodization, which is pretty standard for Rob Dalton knives. Almost all of his knives feature T6 aluminum, including his knuckles. So you can see here the STC, the Mini, Millennium, basically everything in T6 aluminum, which is a perfect material for automatic knives. You don't really need titanium because it does not affect the integrity, and then stainless steel would just be too heavy. He did do some knives in brass. As you can see here, this is the interrogator. I've already shown that. And he's done some in G10 as well. His favorite probably was the T6 aluminum with a black anodization. Dalton's company name also was Dalton Combat Cutlery, so a black anodization would kind of make sense for combat style knives. Going down my kind of specs list, when I was looking at the Dalton picture gallery, one of the things I did notice is this knife was made around the same time as the original Kilroy model, and the blade and handle look very similar. In fact, if you take off the knuckles right there, that's basically the Kilroy model right there. And of course, the single edge version of the Kilroy looked very similar to this single edge version of the Dalton. So I think I've gone over just about all the specs that I have, so let's take a look at the knife in a little bit more detail. I'll retract that blade, and we'll take a look at the handle first, and then we'll go to the blade and fire it a couple more times because I know you guys are going to want to see that. So as I mentioned already, this is the T6 aluminum handle with a black anodization. You can see here that the engraving has been done after the anodization was put on the handle, which does give it a little bit more of a pop finish, or it stands out a little bit more. Dalton tends to actually do the engravings and then the anodization, so you get more of a subdued finish like on this STC, or let's see, on the Dalton Militia Cupid, you can see all of the anodization was done after the writing on the blade or the milling. So whatever you prefer, I don't know. I think it looks kind of nice with that engraved after. So not much writing on the blade or handle itself. So you can see this side is absolutely sterile. Nothing on the spine of the knife. Nothing on the knuckles. Let's take a look at the blade. You can see no logo or writing on the blade itself, which is actually somewhat surprising because Rob Dalton did like to put his little parachute logo as a etching on the blade. He did not choose to do that with this particular model. I don't know if he did on the single edge version. So this does feature Allen screws, which are repeating back and forth. So you can see the Allen screw head is on this side and then flip over on this side, and he's done that back and forth for the construction of this knife. So it is two pieces of aluminum sandwiched together throughout the entire knife right there. The knife does have some contouring. I don't remember what that's called when it's at like a 45-degree angle all around the knife. That does give that knife a little bit more of a comfortable handle, although the edges still are somewhat sharp, or sharper than I would expect on something that you're really going to be gripping onto. It's called chamfering. I think that's what it's called. Let's make sure you can see that. Zoom in a little bit. Yeah, you can see it probably more particularly well on those, the edges of those knuckles. So there you go. Get a good look at the Dogface DE engraving and the Dalton logo right there. Staying on the face of the knuckles, you do have a recessed deployment button right here that is in its own little groove. One of the nice things about having a recessed button is it's not going to automatically go off in your pocket just by the pressure of the side of your pocket being pressed against it. There are some knives with exposed buttons that as soon as you slide it into your pocket, it's going to go off just from your pants pushing up against it. I still wouldn't recommend carrying this knife just because it does not feature a safety at all. So that recessed button is really the only thing that's preventing it from going off, but you do really have to press it down into the handle for it to deploy. That isn't a problem with actually deploying the knife because your hand kind of naturally rests there and there's no problem pressing it when you intentionally want to. Also, there's no screws or a pivot that's going to mistakenly think that it is the deployment button. Now going to the sides of this knife, there's not really too much to discuss. There isn't a there's no jimping or anything like that. The anodization finish is a little bit grippy. This isn't really a knife that you have to worry about your hand slipping out of because it does have 4 cutouts for your fingers, so you're going to have a pretty secure grip. Although, as I may have already mentioned, it is somewhat sharp on these edges, including in the finger grooves or in the finger holes. So if you're really gripping down tight, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't know. That's just one of the things that you do want to consider. You can't really wear gloves with these. I do have extremely skinny fingers. I don't know what ring sizes these are, but with very large hands, you may not actually be able to use this knife or be able to handle it very well. It is a little bit large for my hands, so you can see my fingers are a little bit more spread out than they should be. That does make it a little bit less comfortable. The 2 knuckles here are actually sharpened, surprisingly, so these are actually somewhat aggressive. Let's zoom in on those just to show how aggressive these knuckles are. So, comes to a very aggressive point on there. And let's show those. So, very sharp knuckles, like that, how aggressive those are. And Rob Dalton knives are known for being rather aggressive. Now going up to this blade, it is 3.75 inches of ATS 34 steel. ATS 34 steel is basically the same thing as Benchmade's 154, or not Benchmade's, but 154 CM that is used on a lot of Benchmades. It's a decent steel. Rob Dalton really liked to use it and used it on almost all of his knives. He did use Damascus on a few, or on some models, as well as very rarely he would use San Mai Damascus, which is a sandwiched steel. The blade does feature this cutout groove in the center, and that is for the button to ride in, and then it latches onto the blade right here in that little cutout hole. It's basically the same thing as on the Cupid. I have the Cupid Militia right here, and you can see it has that same track, and then that hole for the button to stick into. You can see just like this, once the button's deployed, it fires out, and the button just rides along that track. So it is a bead blasted blade, which is common on just about every Dalton that you'll see. He really did like to bead blast blades. However, due to the age of many Daltons now, and that a lot of the knives that he made and sold were in Florida, you'll see a lot of spotting on older Daltons. Unless they were kept in a safe or kept in very good condition, you will see them gain spotting, as a lot of them are getting into the 20 years old or 10 to 20 years old now, with some of them going up to maybe 25 years old. So just one thing to consider. Let's deploy this a couple more times, and then I think we'll be able to wrap this review up relatively soon. So the retraction bar is made out of stainless steel rather than titanium. which you would see on maybe a Microtech, what is it, the Microtech Halo. And this is not the only Dalton knife that features a retraction bar. It is also on the Dalton STC. As you can see here, it has a retraction bar as well. There we go. So there you go. Although he did not use a retraction bar on some of his out the front automatics or single actions. As you can see here, it would just be pushing on the side of the blade. And let's deploy this one more time. Very cool. So one of the things you may notice on this knife is that it's not a perfect fit and finish. A lot of Dalton knives, I like to think of them as the same people do for a lot of production Emersons, is that it's really thought of as a usable, awesome design that that's what really comes first, not a display piece. And really, with the original price being $297 for a low number batch of knives that basically a single person is making in just a month, it's a reasonable price. You can't expect perfect fit and finish, even if it's $290 or almost $300. You can purchase a double action out the front pair of knuckles currently for perfect condition if you want to pay $1,300 to $1,500 from a custom knife maker. With this, you're going to be paying more of a reasonable price. While it is expensive, there isn't as high of an attention to fit and finish as some people may like to see. But Dalton collectors normally are not that concerned by fit and finish. One of the things I had noticed particularly is on the retraction bar here, you can see that one of the holes is not, the metal has not been completely cleared from that hole. And you can see that right there. That doesn't really bother too many Dalton collectors, although now that Rob Dalton knives have become very collectible and are not being made anymore, the perfect fit and finish is more desirable because of the collectability. This knife has never been used. I purchased it actually from a Rob Dalton dealer that had held on to a bunch of models previously. So let's take a look at it next to a few other Rob Dalton knuckle knives, just so you can get an idea of what it is like compared to them. So comparing it to some other Rob Dalton automatic knuckles, so we have the Dogface in the center here. We have the Double Trouble Interrogator model with the claw knuckle. And then we have the newest version, or the newest of the knuckle knives. This is, I don't know if he actually came up with a name. I think this one was just called the Special Forces. He did a lot of different engravings and all that. Some of them didn't have any engravings at all. Some were camo. But this is a side opening knuckle knife. So very cool there. So there's kind of a comparison between the different Rob Dalton knuckle knives. He did make, I believe, he did make different variations of the Interrogator model, both the Interrogator 2, which was an aluminum handle and had a Warncliffe style blade, and a few different versions of the brass knuckle Interrogator, which I think one of them was called like the Devil's Playground, which had some spikes on it, kind of similar to the Dogface, but more pointed outwards, and a little bit more aggressive of a blade, where it had kind of a triangle or point to it rather than the swooping hawk bill. So let's flip these over so you can see the other sides of them, as I do know that you guys want to see all of that detail as well. So that's about the end of this video. Let me know what you think of the Rob Dalton Dogface. I think it is a very cool knife. Really glad to be able to add it to my collection, as it took a very long time to track one down. So there you go. Let me know what you think, and have a great day.